Hello friends and welcome back to my YouTube channel. In the previous video of this chapter, we have discussed about the flowering plants, the flower as a structure, and we have also discussed the male reproductive part of the flower, that was the pollen grain, how they are formed, all was discussed in the previous video. In this video, we are going to continue with the female reproductive parts. We will study about the pistil, the megasporangium, or it is called as the ovule, and how it is forming the embryo sac within it. So let's begin. The gynoecium, or the female reproductive part, it consists of the pistil. Okay, the pistil has three parts in it: the stigma, style, and the ovary. Okay, so if there is only one pistil, then we call it as monocarpellary. Then the flower will be called as monocarpellary, and if there are more than one pistils, then it will be called as multicarpellary. Okay, monocarpellary or multicarpellary based on the number of pistils present in them. Okay, then if there are more than one pistils present, then either it may be attached to each other or they may be free in state. Okay, so that's called syncarpus or apocarpus. If they are fused together, then they are called as syncarpus, and if they are free, then it is called as apocarpus. Okay, so this is syncarpus and apocarpus. Now the stigma, style, and the ovary, these are the three structures. The stigma, it serves as the landing platform for the pollen grains, where the pollen grains come and land on the stigma part of the pistil. Okay, the style, it forms the slender part, it forms the stalk like structures which gives the passage or the pathway for the pollen grains to be carried, or for the male gametes to be carried to the ovary. And the ovary is the basal bulged part of the pistil. Okay, inside the ovary there are present the ovarian cavity, also called as the locule of the ovary, or the cavity of the ovary. Okay, so that's the ovarian cavity, and within which the placenta will be located. Okay, placenta, it is located inside the ovarian cavity, and arising from the placenta will be the megasporangia or the ovule. Okay, each ovule will be arising from the placenta, and commonly they are called as ovules, and biologically we can term them as megasporangia. Okay, and the number of ovules may be varying in different species of flowers. Like in wheat, it is only there one ovary is there, and papaya में एक साथ बहुत सारे ovules रह सकते हैं. Okay, so these are a few terminologies. Like the gynoecium pistil, if it is single pistil, we call it as monocarpellary. If there are more than one pistil, we call it as multicarpellary. If the carpels are fused together, then they are called as syncarpus. If they are free, then it is called as apocarpus. And the ovarian cavity or the locule within which the placenta is there, to which the ovules are attached. Okay, so now let us go through the structure of the ovule. I have already drawn a diagram of the typical anatropous ovule. Okay, anatropous ovule, by which means we mean to say that it is inverted ovule. Okay, and there are different kinds of ovules based on their configuration and orientation of the ovule within the flower. Okay, and the inverted ovule is called as the anatropous ovule. So we will go through the structure of the typical anatropous ovule. Okay, each ovule, it first develops from a small finger like projection on the placenta. From the placenta, projection appears, and that arises to be the ovule. The ovule has contained the embryo sac at its center. Okay, it is the embryo sac where the egg cells develop together, and within the embryo sac also there are different kinds of cells where fertilization also occurs. Okay, so we will go through the structure in details about the embryo sac in later part. And the embryo sac is surrounded by nucellus. This part is called as the nucellus, and it is covered up with a mass of parenchymatous cells, and which are mainly meant there for the nourishment of the developing embryo sac. And the ovule itself, it is attached to the placenta with the help of a stalk-like structure called as the funicle. Okay, the ovule is attached to the placenta with the help of the funicle, and it also gets surrounded by two protective coverings named as the integuments. Okay, it is the inner integument, inner part, and the outer integument is at the outer part. So there are two protective covering or layers which are meant for protection, and the lower part is called as the chalazal pole, and the upper part is called as the micropylar pole. The micropylar pole is that part from which the pollen tube, which carries the male gametes, enters into the ovule. Okay, and there is a point at which the body of the ovule is attached to the funiculus. That point is called as the hilum. Okay, the hilum part is that point from where the ovule is attached with the funicle. Okay, so this is the structure of the typical anatropous ovule, and the embryo sac, it develops within this center of the ovule, and that is also called as the female gametophyte because it carries the egg cell within it, so we call it as the female gametophyte as well. Okay, so this is the structure of the ovule, and we have to remember one thing, that this nucellus is the structure which gives the nourishment, it keeps the reserve food material within it. Okay, another thing is that the ovule, the egg cell is there within the embryo sac where the fertilization occurs. Okay, so now we will learn the process of formation of the egg cell within this embryo sac, that is called as the megasporogenesis. Like in the pollen grain formation, we call it as microsporogenesis. Here we will be calling it as megasporogenesis. Okay. So students, before we move to the process of megasporogenesis, let's now learn some of the types of ovules based on their arrangement within the flower, okay, within the ovary. So there could be an erect ovule called as an orthotropous or an atropous ovule, and the inverted ovule is called as the anatropous ovule. This is a typical kind of ovule almost found in all of the species, that is inverted or anatropous ovule. The third type is half inverted or hemitropous ovule. The fourth one is curved ovule, which is called as the compylotropous ovule. Next one is the curved ovule and the curved embryo sac as well. उसमें embryo sac भी तिरछा हो जाता है, curve होकर रह जाता है. That's called as amphitropous ovule. And the last one is funiculus coiled around the ovule. The funicle or the funiculus, it will be coiled around the ovule, and that kind of an ovule is called as a cercinotropous ovule. Okay, so these are the different types of ovules based on their position and arrangement. So next, moving on to the process of megasporogenesis. So as I said, the ovule has two different poles, namely the micropyle pole and the chalazal pole. So what happens at the micropyle pole, there is the formation of the megaspore mother cell, also called as the MMC. Like we have the pollen mother cell for the pollen grain formation, similarly we will having the megaspore mother cells here. And at a quite very early stage when the ovule is developing, what happens from the nucellus region towards the micropylar end, there will be particular cells growing which will be called as the primary archisporial cells. Okay, archisporial cells, and these cells will be dividing to form the primary cell. Okay, primary wall cell, and this will be developing into a sporogenous cell. It develops into a sporogenous cell, and जैसे ही वो sporogenous cell को develop कर जाता है, then that will be functioning as a diploid megaspore mother cell. Okay, so in this way a megaspore mother cell or a megasporocyte is formed at the micropylar end of the ovule, and from those megaspore mother cells they will be dividing meiotically. Okay, this will give us the megaspore mother cell, which will be diploid in nature. Okay, diploid को denote किया जाता है 2n के साथ. So this megaspore mother cell will divide by meiosis, and it will undergo meiosis 1 and meiosis 2, giving rise to 4 haploid cells, also called as the megaspore tetrad. Okay, we call it as a megaspore tetrad because there will be the 4 cells. Okay, so out of this megaspore tetrad, one of them will be remaining functional, and the three of the other three will be degenerating towards the micropyle end only. Okay, that functional megaspore will be containing dense cytoplasm and a prominent nucleus, and that will be further undergoing the formation of the embryo sac. Okay, so in this way megaspore mother cells are formed, and then from them three of them will be megaspore tetrad will be formed out of it. Then out of the megaspore tetrad, out of the 4 cells, 3 will be degenerating and 1 will be ready to develop into the embryo sac. Okay, here this kind of development of the embryo sac from a single megaspore out of the tetrad, only the single megaspore is coming to give rise to the female gametophyte or the embryo sac. Such kind of development is called monosporic development of the embryo sac. Okay, monosporic development. And if by chance, very rarely if it occurs, like from the 2 cells it is developing, then it will be called as bisporic. If 3, then trisporic. And if all the 4s are giving rise to the embryo sac, then it will be called as tetrasporic development. But commonly we see the monosporic development only. Okay, now out of those 4, only 1 is developing, and let us see how it is developing into the embryo sac, okay, or the female gametophyte. A mature embryo sac is a very different structure, and it is fantasizing that only 7 cells are there, but there are 8 nucleus within them. So let us see how these are arranged and how it is formed, the 7-celled 8 nucleate condition of the embryo sac. So from a single cell out of the, suppose this is the megaspore tetrad. So out of this, one functional megaspore develop into the female gametophyte or the embryo sac. And how does it occur? After the formation of the 4, one is functional, and that functional cell or the functional megaspore, it undergoes meiotic divisions. It undergoes mitotic divisions because meiosis is already completed. Now that will undergo mitotic divisions consecutively to form different nucleus within a single cell. Suppose this is going further, then that will divide to form 2 nucleus within it, and then from 2 nucleus a 4 nucleated stage will be coming. Again that nucleus will be dividing further. Remember, cell wall is not being formed yet. Okay, cell wall abhi tak formation hua nahi hai. After that, that will be developing to a 8 nucleate condition. Okay, so after this formation of 8 nucleus by consecutive mitotic divisions, okay, so from 2 nucleate it will become 4 nucleate, and then it will become 8 nucleate condition. Afterwards only the cell wall will be formations, cell wall will be formed. Okay, the formation of cell wall is laid after the 8 nucleate state is achieved. And what happens at the micropylar end? At the micropylar end, there will be 2 cells developed, which will be named as the synergids or the helper cells. Okay, 2 cells at the micropylar end. Let me draw it just to explain. Okay, so if this is the micropylar end, then 2 of the cells will be developing here, which will be named as the synergids. or the helper cells, and within them there will be another central cell which will be the egg cell. Okay, so three of the nucleus are utilized by now. On the opposite end, at the at the chalazel end, there will be another three cells developing, which will be named as the antipodals. Okay, these are the three antipodal cells, and the remaining two of the nucleus will be remaining in the central cell only. वो center part में ऐसे ही रह जाएंगे. Okay, so hence this kind of arrangement is seen where there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and the central cell. There are 7 cells, but there are 8 nucleus we can see. So this is called as 7 celled 8 nucleate condition. This one is called as the central cell, and these two nucleus are together called as the polar nuclei. Okay, so the central cell is having two nucleus called as the polar nuclei. Okay, each of the cells has their particular kind of roles. Okay, the antipodal cells, the synergids actually they guide the developing pollen tube which enters into the ovule through the micropylar end, where there are the male gametes carried. Okay, so the synergids guide them. Also, there are finger-like projections at the base of the synergids which are termed as the filiform apparatus. These are also guiding the pollen tube. Okay, the filiform apparatus. So yes, this is the formation of the embryo sac. From a single megaspore mother cell, 4 megaspore, the megaspore tetrad is formed. Then out of those tetrad, one of the megaspore remains functional, and that megaspore develops into a mature embryo sac or a female gametophyte, which is called a 7-celled 8-nucleate megaspore. Okay, 7-celled 8-nucleate female gametophyte or the embryo sac. So this was all about how the male gametes and the female gametes are produced and formed within the flower. Okay, so we know about the pollen grains formation by now and how the egg cell is formed within the female gametophyte. Okay, so this was the formation of the gametes. Now let us see the next step in sexual reproduction in flowering plants, and which is the most important step. It is called as the pollination. So let us learn about pollination in a bit detail. Okay, so pollination is basically the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma, okay, of different flowers, or it may be same flower, and accordingly pollination could be of two kinds. Okay, self pollination or it could be cross pollination. Okay, so if the transfer of pollen grains occurs from the anther to the stigma of the same flower or of the different flower of the same plant, then that is called as pollination. Okay, accordingly it could be autogamy or geitonogamy. Okay, autogamy means pollinating the same flower. The anther of the same flower goes to the stigma of the same flower of the same plant, and geitonogamy means it goes to the different flower of the same plant. Okay, and here cross pollination is termed as xenogamy, in which the anthers, the pollen grains are transferred to the stigma of another plant, means same species but different flower at a different plant. Okay, but it should be of the same species. Then that is called as xenogamy. Okay, so there are basically two types of pollination, self and cross. Within the self, it could happen as like in autogamy or like in geitonogamy, and cross pollination is termed as xenogamy. Okay, so let us see how autogamy could be confirmed. Like for autogamy to be confirmed, the flowers they need to be they need to be synchronized in the formation of the pollen grains and the pistil. The pistil should be maturing at the same time and the pollen grains should be formed at the same time. Okay, so they need to show synchrony in pollen release and stigma receptivity. So stigma should be mature to receive the pollen grains at the same time. Pollen grains should be released. Okay, that's called synchrony. And another thing is that the male reproductive part and the female reproductive part, they should be placed very close to each other so that they could pollinate easily. Okay, so these are the two conditions in which autogamy could be confirmed. And another thing that some kind of a species like the oxalis, commelina and viola, these species, they produce two different kinds of flowers on the same plant. They could be producing the chesmogamous flowers or the cleistogamous flowers. Okay, two kinds of flowers are produced by the species. Okay, the viola is the common बनाफसा जिसे हिंदी में कहते हैं, कॉमेलिना यानी कॉमेलिना यानी कनकौवा एंड ऑक्सालिस इज द अमरूल का पेड़. ओके, सो इन तीनों स्पेसीज में क्या होता है, वो लोग दो तरीके के फ्लावर्स प्रोड्यूस करते हैं. वन इज द चेस्मोगैमस, another is the cleistogamous. Chesmogamous are just like the normal flowers. They will be having the exposed anthers and stigmas. But the cleistogamous flowers are closed. Okay, they never open at all. The cleistogamous flowers, they never open at all. They do not open, and in such flowers, the anthers and the stigma definitely they lie close to each other. And since they are not opening at all, then definitely the pollen grains, when they will be matured are released, they will be definitely pollinating the same stigma. Okay, the stigma of the same flower will be pollinated by that because they are not opening at all. Hence we call it as invariably autogamous. The cleistogamous flowers are invariably autogamous because they will definitely be pollinating the same flower only. Another thing is that they say that it is producing assioid seed sets. Okay, cleistogamous flowers, they produce assioid seed sets. Assioid seed sets means definitely they will be forming the seeds because they are not opening at all. 100% pollination will be successfully done and they will be forming seed sets. Okay. On the other hand, geitonogamy refers to the transfer of pollen grains from the anther to the stigma of another flower of the same plant. Okay, so though geitonogamy is technically cross pollination because another flower is used, but there will be no genetic variation. There will be genetically similar because it is going to the same plant, different flower but in the same plant. But here xenogamy is a different case. Xenogamy refers to the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of another plant. Okay, to the flowers of another plant. So that's why it will bring genetic variations. Okay, so these are the three kinds of pollinations. And now let us know that what are the different agents of pollination which helps in pollinating the flowers. Definitely when cross pollination is occurring, we will require agents for pollination because neither the pollen grains and nor the egg cell within the ovary or the ovule, they are motile. They are non-motile, both of them. So we will require different agents for pollinating the flowers. Okay, so we will learn about the different agents of pollination. Self-pollination usually does not require any agent, but cross-pollination requires different agents of pollination. And according to the different kinds of agents of pollination, it is also termed in a different names. Okay, like the first one we should consider is that the plants they are pollinated by two kinds of agents, basically abiotic and biotic. In the abiotic agents, mostly the water and wind, they help in pollinating the flowers, and among the biotic agents we have a wide range of organisms which can do pollination for them. Okay, so agents of pollination could be abiotic or they could be biotic. And first of all, we will learn about the wind pollinated flowers. Okay, wind pollination is also termed as anemophily. Anemophily is a term used for flowers which are pollinated by wind. Okay, and it is a method of cross pollination which involves the transfer of pollen grains from anther to the stigma of another flower with the help of wind, through the agency of wind. Okay, so for anemophilous flowers, there are certain criteria like the anther and stigma, they should be exposed and they should be projecting out of the flowers, because the wind currents will not be able to enter into the flower properly, so that the anthers and stigma should be exposed. Okay, and they should project outside the flowers. They should be generally versatile flowers, we should say. The stigma is really hairy and feathery. The stigma should be hairy and feathery to easily catch the wind pollens. जो wind में बह रहे होंगे pollens, उनको easily catch करने के लिए the stigma should be feathery. And these flowers, they need not to be colorful or pleasantly looking or attractive. Okay, so they are odorless and nectarless flowers because they need not attract any insects. Okay, and corn cob, you all might have seen the corn cob. This is a common example of anemophily. Okay, here the tassels which are present on the corn cob, जो hairy like structure होता है, those are nothing but the feathery stigma of the corn, and they help in grabbing or trapping the pollen grains easily. Okay, and the pollen grains, they should be light here, they should be light, smooth and dry, and they should be unwettable, उनको गीला नहीं होना चाहिए, and they should be easily blowing with the wind. That's why they should be light. Okay, and usually the wind pollinated flowers have a single ovule in a each ovary. एक ovary में उनका single ovule रहेगा, या तो फिर otherwise they will be packed into an inflorescence. Okay, to become conspicuous they should be packed in an inflorescence. So this is anemophily or wind pollination. Another one is the water pollination. Water pollination is also termed as hydrophily. Okay, hydrophily, it is a mode of cross pollination which involves the same process by the agency of water. Through water here it occurs. Okay, and pollination in water is very quite rare, almost, and it is very limited also. Almost around only 30 genera of the monocotyledonous or the dicotyledonous plants, only about 30 genera they do pollination via water. Okay, and it is also seen that some of the smallest plants like the pteridophytes, bryophytes, they are limited to a particular region only. That is the reason that they are limited, because they need water for their pollination process. That's why they are limited to certain areas only. Okay, and let us see what are the characteristics of the flower that should be water pollinated. Water pollination could be also of two types, we can say. One is hypohydrophily and another one is epihydrophily. Here, such as in the case of Zostera or the seagrass, and here we could use Vallisneria as an example. Okay, so hypohydrophily means that the flowers will be submerged within the water. Okay, below the surface of the water the pollination will be occurring. Same means the pollen grains will be released in the water currents, and the female flower will be also submerged within the water, and by means of water currents the pollen grains will by chance meet the stigma of the female flower. And in epihydrophily, what happens there, it took place over the surface of water. Okay, इसमें क्या होता है, the stigma of the flower is usually very long, and they reach to the surface of the flower, surface of the water, and the pollen grains are released in the water and they reach up to the surface to pollinate the stigma of the flower. Here, the pollen grains should be protected by a mucilaginous coating because water is there in the surrounding medium. So, to prevent the wetting of the pollen grains, they should be covered with a mucilaginous coating. Okay, mucilaginous covering should be there. And the flowers, they could be of different shapes, like they could be ribbon-like, they could be elongated, they could be easily flowing in the water. Flowers should be easily flowy in the water, and the pollen grains, they should be also long and ribbon-like structure should be there, and they should be prevented by a mucilaginous covering from wetting. Okay. Here both the wind and water pollinated flowers, they actually do not need to be colorful or producing the nectar, because that is the function of the flowers which attract the insects usually, which is done by biotic agents. So those flowers need to be attractive and colorful. And another thing, in both these processes there is a wastage of pollen grains, because to assure pollination, a large number of pollen grains are usually produced in this kind of pollination, and of course many of them could not reach the female flower in time, and so many of the pollen grains are wasted. So it is not a economically beneficial process for this kind of flowers. Okay. Next we will move to the biotic agents, and the first among the biotic agents is insect pollination, or also termed as entomophily. Okay, insect pollinated or entomophily. It is a mode of cross pollination in which the same process occurs via the agency of insects, and when insects are there to carry the pollen grains, then definitely the flowers need to be very beautiful, they need to be attractive, they should be giving floral rewards to the insects, like they should be producing nectar, and also in some of the species they also give spaces for laying eggs. Okay, so these are the different kinds of floral rewards they give to the different kinds of insects. Okay, mostly the bees, butterflies, wasps or moths, they all, beetles also, they all do the insect pollination. Okay, here as I said, the flowers need to be showy, they need to be colorful and attractive, and the pollen grains uh, pollen grains and the nectar are usually the floral rewards here. Okay, the flowers here are giving the floral rewards to the insects. Usually the flowers secrete the nectar for the insects, which they carry from the flower. Within the flower, near the ovary, there are nectariferous glands which produce the nectar. Okay, and the pollen grains are usually rough, and they should be sticky, they should be surrounded by a sticky substance. That should be done because the insects need to stick the pollen grains on their bodies. Okay, when the insects arrive on the flowers, then the pollen grains should stick to their bodies, so that they will be carried away with them to the next flower, where it will be pollinated, or it will be dusted upon the next flower. Okay, sometimes the pollen grains need to be rough and sticky, and the animals, for the sustenance of animal visit to the flowers, there are rewards given, like one of the specific cases is seen in the Amorphophallus flower. Okay, Amorphophallus flower is said to be the longest flower. It could go around up to 6 feet in height. Okay, so it gives a specific the pollinators for space. It gives specific space for laying eggs to the pollinators. Okay, and a similar relationship is also seen in yucca plant and a moth which pollinate it. Okay, actually the yucca plant or the moth, they both cannot complete their life cycle without each other. Okay, euca plant and the moth, they have also a similar kind of relationship in which the moth lays the eggs to complete its life cycle in the flower only, and within the ovarian locule it places their eggs, and the yucca plant is pollinated instead of the revolve. Okay, so what happens when the larva it hatches out of the egg as soon as the seed starts developing. Okay, seed developing होने से पहले वहाँ से larva निकल के वो बाद में चला जाता है. So in this way, as it's just like a symbiosis or symbiotic relationship between the flowers and the different kinds of insects. So this was how the flowers are pollinated by different agents, like abiotic agents में water and wind, and in the biotic agents there are different kinds of insects which could pollinate the flower. Okay, not only the insects, but there are other kinds of animals which could pollinate the flowers, like the bird pollinated flowers. It is called ornithophily. Okay, ornithophily if it is pollinated by the birds. Then malacophily if it is pollinated by snail. Chiropterophily or chiropterophily if it is pollinated by bat. Okay, and many more are there. So in these methods different kinds of flowers could be pollinated. Okay.